Welcome to the Best Soccer Show. Jason Davis, Jared DuBois, on a show that was not supposed to be like this. We had planned to do a fun, very BSS type of show tonight as our final 2022 program. The World Cup is over. The U.S. men's national team is done. Turns out there's some national team news that we didn't know was going to drop today that we might get to, that we would have talked about in a normal setting, regardless of what else we had planned. But this is obviously going to be a different kind of show. I'm sure everybody who's watching this knows that on Friday we lost Grant Wahl while covering the World Cup in Qatar, attending the Argentina-Netherlands game. He collapsed, had a medical emergency while in the tribune at the stadium there and was given CPR and ultimately did not survive. We debated this very, very in depth, whether to do this show at all. Yeah. And Jared's here with me. Jared, go ahead and say hi because I didn't give you a chance yet.
Oh, I mean, yeah, for those of you who are on audio, yeah, I'm here too. But I think for a lot of folks, it was just like, man, it was a very, very dead moment Friday night, and it's a shocking moment. And I think you and I went back and forth about, yeah, we were supposed to be playing games tonight. We were thinking about doing a drunk show. We're like, all of a sudden it's like, wow. All that
I would have played every
feels...
drop. We would have had, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really weird. And I think more than anything, I think we wanted a moment to have tonight that everyone wants to have, which is just, let's take a night. Let's take a night and just kind of talk about this a little bit.
Well, I think what we came to was, not only do I have some things I would like to express about Grant Wahl, and I know, Jared, you've had some experiences with Grant as well. And we have a shared history as a show with Grant. Not only that, we do, this is a call-in show. This has been a call-in show from the very beginning, going back to 2011 when we launched the show. And, you know, there wasn't another call-in opportunity for soccer fans in this country. And there still really isn't unless you have SiriusXM-FC, which, you know, please do have SiriusXM-FC. You know, there's not a lot of places for soccer fans to go to express themselves. You can go tweet stuff, and I know a lot of people have. But if you want to call us up, if you want to kind of talk about Grant, maybe how you came upon his work, maybe what he meant to you and to the soccer community, you know, this is a place to do that, right? And we will eventually have phones up. They're not working at the moment. We will get the phones up as soon as we can to give you an opportunity to jump in. If you want to put something in the chat, we will share that with our video audience on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and everything else. Jared, do you want to share some thoughts about Grant? I mean, I could easily jump in here, but
I mean, I think you and I both. Obviously, you had a probably more extensive relationship with him than I did because you had more instances where you needed to have him on your show and stuff like that. But what's setting out there in the Twitter sphere and stuff like that, if you're reading out, it's all right. I mean, if you look at the most common word you're going to find, it's kind. It's the most common word you find with everything anyone had to say. And that extended to us as well. When we were a show 12 years ago, 11 years ago, just getting started. I think you looked it up just the other day on the 10th episode ever of this show.
Was that the 10th episode? I didn't count it. Was the 10th episode we'd ever done?
On our 10th episode. And it was a coup because just to play old man Rodius for a while here, you and I came of age in a time of soccer where there was just four dudes that were really doing it. There were four dudes that were really doing it at a large outlet scale. You had Stephen Goff, Ridge Mahoney, Strauss, and Grant Wahl. Those are like the four dudes that were doing it, like really doing it at a large scale, large outlet. Our guest JTT right here that's gonna be over having a little bit. He was doing it instead.
Throw Frank DeLappa in there just to kind of get his name out.
There's a few. But it was what I'm point I'm making is there was a small handful of people that were. Yeah. Doing it at that scale, and for a guy like Grant to give his time, you know, and to really legitimize us by coming in.
There's a reasonable chance I'm going to cry on the show. Just want to make everybody aware of that. I mean, you know, I'm kind of an emotional guy anyway, and then there's like a bunch of other stuff in my life that has kind of all come to a point, and now we lose Grant Wahl. And Eric is saying in the chat that Grant's end of the year list is how he found this show in 2011 or 2012. Grant put us on a list, and this is exactly what we want to talk about, and exactly what everybody else who's been sharing thoughts about Grant. I read Alexander Abnos' piece today. I read a piece. I read several people. Richard Deitch wrote a piece today at The Athletic or the other day. You know, so many people telling a similar story. That and look, there are lots of soccer fans that didn't like the soccer opinions of Grant Wahl.
Sure.
Or by by sort of just extension of who he was and who he worked for, treated him like establishment journalism. And we know how those people are treated in 2022, right? Or 2015 or 2018. But Grant Wahl did everything he could to help people in the soccer industry, the soccer media business.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to, right? He had the job. Now,
Dude's
he
a
obviously
mensch.
left Sports Illustrated eventually and things changed for him. But he had the job. He was the guy. I was thinking today, just before we came on, Jared, how massive was the Beckham experiment? I mean, there was nothing like that for us.
I was out
Nothing
here
like
when it was
that.
happening on. It was big. You know, it's big, and it's just he was constantly willing to use his platform, not to keep his platform, but to make the platform wider for others.
Make it bigger.
You know, yeah. It was really, there's so many people out there that are trying to. That, you know, there's a natural thing to fend people off from getting on your platform because, like I said, there were so many few people doing it. You know, there has to be an innate need or want to protect that because there's so few of those opportunities. But
Yeah,
Grant
people
saw it
treat it
differently.
like it's a zero-sum game, and
Yeah.
that's a problem. And Grant
Yeah.
understood that it wasn't. Even if it might be at that moment, it shouldn't be like that, right? That soccer in this country should get more coverage, have more people doing it. If people are passionate and working hard and willing to jump in, they should be supported and lifted up. And he did that for us.
I'll never forget. Like when I can't remember if he said it on the show or we talked about it off air at some point, but he would always talk about like he'd like to run to our show. Like he would run to our show.
I didn't remember that. That's good.
Yeah, maybe he said it to me on side then, but I always found it funny to imagine Grant Wahl, who he is and his stature, running to my dick jokes. Like because that's the thing. Like you were just talking about, like more voices means a lot of different types of content, and he got that. Like he's never going to say the things I say.
No,
no. But the fact that the stupid things that I say are funny to him, and he would take the time to listen and platform for us. Yeah. I mean, it just. We were doing something different, and he was willing to embrace the fact that different was good, and not just with us, for a ton of other content creators out there in the universe.
There was something in Alexander Abnos' piece that I want to talk about briefly here before we bring on Jonathan Tannenwald, who is waiting for us to bring him on, and certainly has some things to say about Grant. Alexander Abnos pointed out that Grant had a tendency to get into some Twitter spats. This was a thing that Grant did on occasion, right? In most cases, and I don't want to say I kind of want to say 100% of the cases. But in most cases, Grant was defending somebody or defending journalists or pointing at somebody and saying, hey, why are you being like that? Like, why is it necessary for you to attack somebody who is your colleague, right? Yeah. Now, this is mind-blowing for people in soccer, for a lot of us who came from amateur ranks who were doing podcasts and blogs in 2012 and 2013 before trying to make it a career. Grant Wahl treated you like a colleague. Now, that's two sides of the coin, right? Treated like you colleague. He gave you respect, and that made you feel good. Oh,
Boss
Grant
means
Wahl
he's to call you
respects
out
me,
on bullshit.
but he calls you out on bullshit.
Yep.
He will tell you that you're wrong for doing what you did. And that's hard for some people to hear because we all live in a free expression internet world. We say whatever the hell we want to say. Yep. And the repercussions are always like, okay, who's calling us out? If you are an independent blogger, if you do something, if you're freelancing, if you're not getting paid for whatever you do.
Truth to power. And that goes all the way up to running for the FIFA presidency.
Just because you're not getting paid doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility. Yeah. Right? It's a community. Yeah. All right. I'm going to bring Jonathan Tannenwald in here, a good friend of the program, going all the way back.
Who he's rooting for at the World Cup.
Certainly a guy, I will say that Jonathan Tannenwald, in the spirit of Grant Wahl, is very good about this too. Now, I'm sure he'll be humble and say he doesn't have, Grant's stature, which none of us really do. But John, I want to say that I do think that you are very much in that spirit, that you want to lift people up. I appreciate that about you.
Thank you, Jason, very much for that. I am wearing the Argentina jersey for Grant.
Can we turn you? Let me see if I can do this myself. I'm going to turn you up. Go ahead, John.
Let me slide a little closer to the mic.
There you go. That would be good. Yeah. Argentina jersey. Tell everybody the background on the Argentina thing about Grant Wahl.
Okay, so Grant, when he was in college at Princeton, studied abroad in Buenos Aires, in part with a connection made from Bob Bradley, who was the head coach of Princeton's men's soccer team at the time, and Jesse Marsh was one of his players, which is part of why Grant and Bob And Grant and Jesse have been so close for so many years. And through that connection in Buenos Aires, that turned into Grant's senior thesis at Princeton on the intersection of soccer and politics in Argentina, which is one of the leading countries in terms of the intersections of soccer and politics. I think it's safe to say. And as Grant has said and written a few times over the while, how he managed to convince somebody at Princeton to let him do that on a scholarship was a feat in and of itself. But he did. He kept a soft spot for Argentina as a country and a national team and Boca Juniors as a club for the rest of his life.
And I want to say, wasn't there a family he stayed with down there that he ended up staying tight with for like a long time? I could have sworn I remember reading that or something like that, where there was a family he stayed with when he was down there.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Probably.
But John, let's talk about Friday night, okay? I know you're a
Yeah.
guy who very close with Grant. How'd that go down for you? Like, first of all, I mean, for all three of us, like, just talk about that it's gonna be like a moment you remember forever kind of thing. Like, where were you? What were you doing? How did it come through to you?
I will say this, Jared. I'm torn about talking about how Grant left us.
No,
not
I mean,
that it
well, how
doesn't-
you got the information. That's what I
No,
was asking.
I know, but even that, right? Like for me, I've had several of these moments. I'm going to be terrible tonight. I'm just not going to make a lot of sense most of the time. But and I'm not going to say that I was close to Grant Wahl. I wasn't. We weren't friends. We weren't texting constantly. You know, we ran into each other occasionally, or he was
Acquaintances,
always good with his time to come on the show whenever we asked, or he would have me on whatever he was doing, which happened multiple occasions. I remember the last time I was on a show, I think about a year ago, something like that, maybe more than that. He said something about, I wish I had your voice, Jason. I wish I sounded like you when I did my podcast, which always, it's kind of stuck with me. It is one of those things where intellectually you understand that he's not here anymore, but you forget for a second, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden that wave of realization comes back. Oh, Grant Wall's I'm not going to see any more Grant. I'm not going to read any more Grant. There's not going to be any more Grant Wall in the world. And that makes me not want to go back to finding out and thinking about that, because it's so cruel, right? It doesn't make any damn sense.
Well,
I mean,
the reason why I want to talk
I don't want to
about
get
it
into the
just
theology
briefly-
of this moment, Jared, but it's hard for
No, it's
somebody who
fine.
does believe in a higher power.
No, it's okay. Like for me, partly the reason I want to talk about it is because you understand the gravity and the reach that Grant Wahl had by the way that the information came out and the wave that it presented. So, for example, I was having dinner with friends at a Mexican food restaurant. I just happened to look at my phone, saw someone saying, "What's all this Grant Wahl stuff about?" I started looking into it, and like, I read it right in the middle of dinner with my friends, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I start getting really heavy-hearted about it. And as I'm sitting there in this random Mexican food restaurant over the course of 1 hour, I'm eating my dinner, it's on CNN by the end of it. Like, it's on CNN within minutes after I get the information on Twitter. And to talk about how many journalists are out there that would get that kind of exposure that quickly and become that kind of story. And granted, the Qatar stuff that goes along with it, that's a big part of it. With the stuff going down with his brother, which we're not going to get into here, it's going to be more about a memory thing. But it does speak to the pedestal that he was on in our sport. When you have like the Harry Winters and stuff like that coming out and saying things like, there's not any other American journalist that has that same kind of reach globally and had the connections globally that Grant had.
Go ahead, John.
So I had just gotten home from synagogue. Actually, I go to synagogue on Friday nights. I'm not the most religious person in the history of humankind, but it helps me have a social connection to some people who are kind of like me. And my synagogue on Friday nights, there's music and free dinner along the way, so it's worth the trouble. And I mention that in part because I will say that in Judaism, when we mourn people, we do cry and we do mourn, but we also have a lot of humor along the way. And I figure we might have a little of that tonight to help us. I got home, I sat down in front of my computer because I have no life and that's what I do. And one of the first tweets I saw was from Morgan saying, "I can't believe this stuff about Grant Wahl," or whatever the exact phrasing was. And my phone started lighting up with texts from people, and I started seeing more on Twitter. And I started, it was it was what, 8 or 9 o'clock, I think, over here in the evening. So it was the dead middle of the night in Qatar. And even a lot of the people who I know who've been up late over there covering the late games were asleep. And I texted one person at US Soccer who I knew was in the States. And then right around, just by coincidence, right at around that time, the statement from US Soccer came out, and I just said, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, that's the moment I knew it was real. When
And
I think his wife Celine retweeted it as well.
Well, and I didn't know whether Celine was in New York or Qatar, so I didn't know where she was. Not all that long from then, I heard from somebody who is in Qatar who gave me what I would call it, I guess, independent confirmation, because I am always initially with all of these things very skeptical.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes across.
As Grant would expect you to be, by the way.
That is my life. That is what I do. I'm skeptical for a living. Grant and I fall in the category of professional cynics, as a lot of journalists are called. And I'll get later, I'm sure, into how much of an example he set in that regard. But I started making some phone calls to friends who I knew were in the States. One of them, Jason, is somebody who I believe you and I are both friends with, Clinton Yates of ESPN.
Yeah.
My fellow DC native, which is part of why I know him so well. Heard from a lot of people, friends, relatives. I have a relative who's a sports writer for The Athletic who covers NASCAR, who texted me to reach out to me, say how I was doing. And then I just started doing the thing that I could instinctively do to cope, which was retweeting and quote tweeting and posting every tangible piece of information.
John, I thought you were going to say drinking for a second there. I thought I didn't know you at all.
No, you know me well enough. I don't drink that much. And I just kept doing it and adding to it, adding some of my own thoughts along the way, adding some of the major tributes that were paid from people. And the thread grew far longer than any thread on Twitter reasonably should. But the scale of the outpouring all the way around in the United States and beyond, first of all, showed the impact that Grant had on the sport. And as Henry Winter said, and a few other people who were with him from other countries in Qatar said, it is not for granted, pardon the pun, and certainly not by right for those of us who've been in the sport for a long time, that an American would have that kind of impact in the international soccer media. Mm-hmm. But Grant did, and he was listening to what you guys said a few minutes ago about, who the early leading voices were for me when I was in high school. I would go to RFK on Saturday night and then come home to read about it. The four big voices for me were Grant, Steve Goff, Jeff Bradley, and Doug McIntyre.
I forget about Jeff Bradley back in the day. That's a good call.
And for those of you who are tuning into this show, and relatively new to the sport, when Jeff and Doug wrote at ESPN, and then Jeff Carlisle came to ESPN after them, but Jeff Bradley with the Boot Room and Doug McIntyre with his U.S. national team insider columns were, in the online realm, the most essential reading.
Yeah.
And the fact that I have gone on to be friends with them, friends with somebody who, and this is not any secret because he knows this, I idolized Steve Goff growing up. Every single one of us who grew up in the Washington area,
as you should,
idolized Steve Goff and Grant Wahl and Jeff Bradley and Doug McIntyre. And the fact that I've been friends over the years with all four of them is a hell of a privilege.
There's something about Grant, too. I mean, I all the respect in the world for Steve Goff. And certainly that caliber and that kind of journalist. Grant was different, right? Not only was he a very good journalist and an excellent writer and could write the hell out of a profile, he also had a bit of showman in him, right? I mean, maybe not even showman. Maybe it was that instinct. Okay, I can impact change, or I can draw more attention to something, or I can tell a story through an active thing rather than just sort of collecting information. There's nothing wrong with being a
I
reporter
think
of that ilk.
Steve Goff would not hesitate to report on inequalities in guitar, but I don't think he'd be wearing the shirt like Grant
He
would.
wouldn't be, well, and I want to go back to even Grant running for FIFA president, right? That thing, it comes off as, okay, it's a stunt, it's kind of hokey, but he walked the walk. Like, he went to the places, he did the things. He didn't just create a website and go on TV and yell about FIFA. He was working to bring attention to things he thought were wrong about the way the sport was governed. And he got, go ahead, John.
Part of why he did it dated back to, and I don't know who at the Washington Post will ever listen to this show. What I'm about to say, I don't mean as an offense to the Washington Post in the least. It was the newspaper that I grew up reading every day. I still read it almost every day online. The Washington Post has, going all the way back to the 1994 World Cup and probably before then, the Washington Post as a media outlet has respected soccer as something that people in its readership were interested in because of the nature of Washington, D.C. And the LA Times, Jared, as you know, between Kevin Baxter and Graham Jones before him, has been similar.
Graham Jones.
Has always respected soccer as a sport, and it's something that the readership in what was at the time a local paper was interested in. That was not the case at Sports Illustrated.
Right.
As everybody who listens to this show knows, it has not always been the case at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Grant had to fight for it. He had to fight with editors. He had to fight with his journalistic idol, Frank DeFord, a fellow Princeton alum who hated soccer. And when you have to have a little bit of that fighting spirit to try to prove to people that the demand is out there, does it make you a showman per se? I don't know, but it certainly instills a little something in you that probably doesn't ever go away if you had to do it for as long as he did.
Yeah.
And I respected him as much as I do, in part because and a lot of other people have had to have those same fights over many, many years. And because Grant won them at Sports Illustrated, a lot of us elsewhere knew that we could win them elsewhere, or at least believed that we could.
John, you talked earlier about in Jewish tradition of honoring people through laughing and comedy and stuff like that. And I love that Sean Francis kind of put this out there when he was talking about it, but I had the same thought and didn't post it. Now in hindsight, I wish I had, but the do-rags and running gear, and like when you be out like in El Salvador or Honduras or something, like doing his workouts and taking the pictures, and like he has to stand out. Like you couldn't stand out more in the foreign land than while Grant Wahl was dressed to do his workouts.
You couldn't stand out domestically more. In 2000,
cue ball bald, tall as hell. The first thing I ever noticed, John, before you say anything, the first thing I ever noticed meeting, I think the first time I met Grant Wahl in person was in Los Angeles for an MLS Cup.
You can see his shoulder blades through. You can see his shoulder blades through pads and a coat.
Yeah,
like it's like bony.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how much interaction we had before this. I was a baby blogger, right? I had a podcast. You and I were maybe started at that whatever LA. It was an LA MLS Cup, and there was a media event or an MLS event in Manhattan Beach or something, like down by the water, a pier or something like that. There was a place. I remember going to this bar and seeing Grant Wahl standing at the bar wearing what I assume to be $1,000 patent leather Italian shoes. Like he's got these, and he's big dude, so his feet are like, his feet are huge.
I was there. I remember.
I'm looking at the dude's shoes. I'm like, oh, that's how Grant Wahl rolls. That's how he does that. I got it. Okay.
I never resented it. I think, Jason, you and I know people in the wire world who, as you said at the top of the show, resented Grant's stature a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I would say,
business, John. Everybody's got an ego.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody in the sports
your name's on the byline, John. Your name's on the byline, right?
Everybody in the sports media has an ego, and I made a promise to myself a long time ago that I've kept, that I would not resent anybody who makes money in soccer in America because so few of us do it that if you can, good for you.
Like I said,
And about
he did. I mean, obviously he had the stature, so you can say he was working from a position of already being in a good place,
Yes.
having written a best-selling book, having worked for the best sports writing magazine in the country, all these things. But he did see again this as, let's bring in more people to this party rather than, hey, let's keep it exclusive and only a few people get to be doing this. and get
He's
to-
a hype man. He honestly was like he was a soccer hype man to a certain
He did a
extent, but a
good
very
job.
professional one.
He was
But
incredible.
he did it
like, how do you get more
for me
eyeballs
a
on the
number of
sport?
occasions. He did it for me on a number of occasions, Jared, and it's some of the greatest and probably most influential compliments I received. I was not the Inquirer soccer beat writer until a couple of years ago, but Grant was recognizing my work and circulating my work when I was just the overnight web editor at the Inquirer, writing about soccer on the side. I will say one other thing about his unique appearance in this world physically. At the 2003 Women's World Cup in DC, which was the first major event I ever really covered, I was credentialed from my college newspaper. I'd been obviously to RFK many times, but only as a paying spectator, as a fan. So I didn't know how to get from the downstairs where the media stuff is all the way down, all the way back up. And it was all ramps, Jason, as you know, so you go up. And
I
one
saw
up
you
and
tweet
down.
about this.
Yeah.
I definitely identified with it as soon as you said
I
it. Yeah.
saw in the crowd, I didn't know where the elevator was. I saw Grant walking up one of the ramps, and I just followed him. And I was literally at the first World Cup that I ever covered. I was riding Grant Wall's coattails to the press box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, John, any last thoughts? We do want to see if we can get some to open up the phones to some folks that want to see some, and also put some stuff in the chat in there. I know it was a personal night for you Friday night and all this weekend. Any lasting moments or lasting things you want to say on the way out? Because I know it was personal for you, buddy, and I know that we all lost a good one, but I know you lost someone that definitely helped in your career.
He helped me a whole lot. And it will not be easy for me. I'm trying to get to the She Believes Cup in February. Whatever the first national team game is that I go to, it will not be easy. And I think for all of, whether it's a men's or a women's game, because Grant covered a whole lot of U.S. women's teams games along the way too. And I would think, given the caliber of the She Believes Cup, that he would have been in at least one, if not all of the games. I'm sure we'll have something in January at the coaches convention here in town, because there'll be a lot of us here. I'm sure that for all of us who pass through New York on a semi-regular basis, the next time we go to Smithfield Hall, which was his haunt of choice, where I've heard they're going to dedicate one of the outdoor tables, put his name on it to memorialize him, the one where he had his sort of, I almost want to call them salons, for the Champions League games midweek, that all kinds of people, Christine Cupo and even John Skipper and lots of folks would show up to. Those will all be hard, but the easy part, it costs nothing to be kind to people. It costs nothing to be outgoing to people. It just requires deciding to do that. And it requires deciding to do that regularly. But if you make that decision, even when you work for Sports Illustrated and are the preeminent voice of a sport in a country this big, if you make that decision, you'll do it. And you'll do it again. And you'll do it again. And that was Grant Wahl.
Yeah, one thing I've taken from this, I was also thinking about Darryl Grove, right? A couple years ago, we lost Darryl Grove.
Yes.
And the thing both of them did, and again, I'm not going to say anybody was perfect. Okay, everybody's got flaws, everybody's got things. Certainly, Grant mishandled some situations. I have done that too. Right? People, you say something, you regret it, you don't get to take it back, especially if it's on the internet. the thing that both Daryl and Grant did is that they were actively interested in other people, not in a selfish way, but because they wanted to know, especially with this sport in this country. Right? They came from very different backgrounds, but what they both understood about American soccer is that it has to be a big tent. Right? You have to meet people where they are, and you can't stop somebody from making the journey because you'll never give them a chance to get there if you're gatekeeping, whatever. I have my tongue in cheek. I thought about this weekend too, Jared. I have my tongue in cheek thing about jerseys at games. Like, don't wear the jersey of a team that's not playing. I make a big deal about that. Guys, it's a joke, right? It's a joke. You wear whatever you want to wear. You want to be a soccer fan in America? Just be a soccer fan in America.
You're right.
And Grant was, that was okay. Well, we won't go into that, but that's the thing about Daryl and Grant. They came at it different ways, certainly from different places in terms of career success and recognition. Daryl was a big name in our soccer community, but probably wouldn't have mattered outside that bubble for most people. Grant was big in a number of different areas outside of the soccer bubble. People who knew he was, especially because of the LeBron piece that he wrote for Sports Illustrated when LeBron was still in high school and all that. But they actively worked to help people, or to even if it wasn't promoting those people, it was giving them encouragement, was talking to them individually. And I've never been great at those things, partly because imposter syndrome is a bitch, right? And you have to get to a place one day. And I'm lucky enough. I worked really hard. I think I'm good at it, but I'm lucky enough to have the job I do. And I'm sure Grant thought the same way, right? And hey, why not give that back? Why not give something back, especially to this community in particular, because it does probably need it. Soccer does need it. And I don't know how I'm going to tackle this. I've already told people that I actually deactivated my Twitter account on Friday morning. I decided that Twitter wasn't a good place for me. It's not Elon Musk
meme.
It's not Elon Musk. It's not any of that. It's just it wasn't a good place for me anymore. I deactivated my account on Friday morning, and then by Friday night I was like, well, I feel the need to say something, right? And I want to be part of this chorus because I want to add my voice to those people who are honoring Grant Wahl.
I couldn't stop refreshing my feed in bed that night. I couldn't go to sleep refreshing my feed.
Now I think, well, maybe not through Twitter. I don't know how, but I need to be more like Grant Wahl, even if I don't have the impact he could have because of who he was and because of what he achieved.
Jason, here's the thing. I bet
something.
you. I'm not gonna just get on my knees in front of you real quick or anything like that. But you have dozens of people on your show every month, paying it forward. Like there's guys that are just trying to break in that you're having on your show every month. That you're giving 10 minutes to, you're giving 15 minutes to. And it's not to make you into like, we all have these mensch things that we could do in our lives. Like John said, it doesn't cost anything to be kind, Yeah. And so just making those decisions that like, hey, this guy's working hard out there. This guy's covering, he's covering USL 2 and he's like, he's really, really working hard. Like that's the guy I'm going to have on my show this week because the work merits it. The work is what is giving this guy his place, and make your platform wider. If everyone in this country just makes their platform wider and helps someone else up out of the water onto the platform, like it's going to be a better place. And if that's Grant's legacy, that's a hell of a legacy.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Jason, how to be more like Grant. And it's a sentiment that I've seen in a lot of people say, obviously, in the last few days. Now, one that comes to mind for me is we know that a lot of people, and I'm going to be blunt because Grant was blunt. We know that a lot of white people in the game in this country kind of like it, especially among the fans, kind of like it to be a little exclusive because it makes them feel good about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
To have something that feels exclusive that they're part of.
Mm-hmm.
Grant didn't have a damn second of that. Not one.
Yeah.
If you want to be more like Grant Wahl, you make this tent as big as you possibly can. It might mean you watch a soccer game on TV in another language, even if you don't speak it.
It also means you might kick the tent post down sometimes if it merits it. Like you might kick something down if it needs to be kicked down because hey, we could build something better than what is right here.
Yeah.
And it might mean that you retweet somebody's content that's not in your English language.
Sure.
It might mean that if you are inclined to ask what that thing is that I retweeted in French or German or Spanish or whatever, Maybe I didn't know until I put it through Google Translate, but you can do that yourself. It is the biggest, most popular sport in the world, and the diversity of it in this country is its greatest asset. And Grant tried his best to reflect that. It's not always easy when you're a one-man band to do it, but he tried, and he also, I'm sure some of your callers will get into this. I'll try to address it quickly. He had a spine, and he had principles, and he stood for them, and he stuck a microphone in people's faces who really didn't want to have microphones stuck in their faces. And he asked them to answer the question and answered on the record.
Just the last 2 weeks, John. Just the last 2 weeks.
It sure inspired a lot of us. And I said this, I know there's a lot of callers coming. I'll try to make this quick, as I said, but I'm never good at it. So, Jason, you're the radio host. Cut me off and we hit the mark.
Just wrap it up, John. Just we got to get break. We're not going to a break, but
I think we're not going to speculate on what the cause was, but we know everything that has happened in Qatar over the last month plus, which is why I'm not there. Yes, I work for a local newspaper. Yes, it costs a lot of, I know how much money it cost to cover this World Cup. I was in some of the early planning meetings that U.S. Soccer held with the journalists who were interested in going. It's a lot of money. There have been World Cups that you might have thought were more expensive that were not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the only reason why I'm not there. And so many things that have happened there have unfortunately proven me right. And I'm very happy that my friends who have gotten home have done so safely, and I hope that everybody else who was there will get home safe.
Appreciate the time, John. I really appreciate jumping on.
My pleasure, fellas. Thank you for having me.
For the record, John, it's the only time we're not going to play the drop when you're on the show tonight.
only time.
All right.
Only time. Just not the right vibes. We do have our phones open. I mean, I don't know that we have a plan for how long we want to go here.
In the meantime, I've just been kind of queuing up. If I want to, can I share a few of the
we also should make sure, before I forget, Morgan also recorded something. She wasn't able to be here. Morgan recorded something. We want to play that in a bit as well.
Yeah, so just want to throw a few things from the chat and read them out loud for the folks on the podcast that aren't getting to see this. Matt Dressler says, it was odd how I felt like I knew Grant personally. I'd never met him, but I felt that through his podcast, writing, and what he shared on social media. And I think that's the way, honestly, a lot of people feel in that regard. Nick P. put, so I think a lot this weekend about Grant Wahl in the early days of soccer blogging. And that's something we talked about, is that there's just... his career went from the days of old school journalism to the new school, and still he was able to bring people along. And
this is what somebody said earlier. I don't know if I don't know if the comment's there, but I will say, and I know Derek Ritchie also said, he was in here, said that Grant worked with did something with them for Straight Red Card for Big Soccer 2010, 2011. Right, 2011 is when he came on the Best Soccer Show. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that I interacted with him. My blog started in 2008. I was doing podcasts by 2009. I'm sure I had some interaction with Grant Wahl before he was on our show in 2011. Grant Wahl, again, was writing for the preeminent sports publication in this country. I know he wasn't just doing soccer. He was doing other things at the time, still college basketball. But he never acted like he was bigger than doing our podcast or Derek's podcast or being on something that most people would say, why would a reputable journalist go on that thing, right?
Well,
he never did that.
I shared this on the Besties Slack on Friday night, but I went back and was looking through my DMs, and there was a time where I felt too intimidated to post the break news that I had. Like, there was a Galaxy bit of news one time, and I was like, I even said to him, hey, I don't share my name on this because I don't want to get any kind of retribution, because I'm a little guy that was doing also a small Galaxy podcast at the time as well, which is now doing very well for itself, Corner of the Galaxy out there, run by Josh Guessman. But I didn't have the balls to break the news, so I DM'd Grant on the side, and he goes and he gets it confirmed, and he runs with it. I was happy to give him the news, but it's just there was a time where if you were small, you felt like there would be retribution if you were the guy out there breaking news against things, or Grant was happy to take it in my hands, and I love that I had that relationship with him where I could give him that kind of information. Also, sometimes we just DM each other about wine.
That's the most Rodius Wahl thing I've ever heard.
My man liked wine.
So again, the phone lines are open, 717-727-2378. If you want to share something via phone call, jumping on the air, you can do it. If not, absolutely fine. Keep those keep those messages coming in the chat.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Morgan Tensa, who is, let's point out that this is like a generational thing, right? We lost Grant. He was 40. He just turned 48 years old. 40, is that right?
I'm not sure he had his 49th birthday while he was there, I believe.
No, he turned 48
was it
because he was born. I saw born in 74, which means he's 5 years older than me. I'm 43. He would be 48. Pretty sure he just turned 48. He's been doing it for 20 years, pretty much going back to the earliest days of what writing about soccer was in the United States. He meant something to us. He came through at a time for us when we were just starting, when blogs were blowing up, and he had a platform to help us. He put us on a list to help people find our show. He has also been important to people like Morgan, who is young, right? She doesn't remember those days.
If you're not on
toddler.
the Besties Patreon, you don't hear you don't hear the bonus shows. We explore all the time how we have a very big chasm between us, between her youth and our age.
Morgan's a baby, right, in this business, and she's just getting started, and she's doing social media, and she's working behind the scenes. She's also doing photography at various sports, but soccer being one of them. And she has her own connection to Grant Wahl. It tells you there's no line. He didn't say, well, I only get along with this group, or I can't relate to younger people. He was constantly helping me. I don't know what this is. I haven't watched it myself. I think Nick had a chance to watch it today. Nick, can we bring up Morgan and have her share her thoughts about Grant Wahl?
Hey guys, sorry I can't be a part of the show tonight, but I still wanted to give a quick message about my experiences with Grant. I did tweet a lot about this stuff, so I'll keep it relatively short. I just wanted to say that Grant, besides being one of the best journalists in the sports world and in the soccer community, was an amazing human being. His doors and DMs were always open for anyone who had questions or needed advice. He wasn't jealous of his competitors, often the first to congratulate people on a job well done. He was a supporter and an advocate for equality, whether on the soccer pitch or in real life. The whole sports community, especially the soccer community, and especially the American soccer community, as tight-knit as we are going to miss having a guy like Grant in our lives. I personally thank Grant for all of that he's done in my short career and all the support he's giving me since I've met him. The soccer world is not going to be the same without Grant Wahl.
Absolutely true. And you don't even have to have liked Grant as a media personality to feel that.
Nah.
That's just a monster in this business, in this country, in the soccer community.
What people that aren't in the soccer content game may not know is that you get a random DM. Like, hey,
Sure.
Hey, I like that. Or, hey, that was
a good
funny.
thing. That was
Or,
good.
that's
That
fun.
was
random
yeah.
DMs. Random DM, just because he he was reading. He was always, he absorbed so much content that you didn't even realize he was absorbing.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like John said, doesn't take a lot to be kind.
Yeah. Nicky Soup and Sausage was not absent earlier. He's here now. That's why we got the phones up again. It doesn't look like anybody wants right now to express themselves via phone call. That's fine. I do want to bring Nick on just briefly. I know Nick, you weren't there the early days of the Best Soccer Show when we were getting help from Grant. I don't know how much interaction you ever had with him, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you thought of Grant Wahl as a soccer guy in this country.
He knew his stuff, that's for sure. I never had any personal interaction with him. All my experience with Grant is just seeing him on TV, listening to the occasional podcast, but he knew his stuff. And I know here in the great state of Ohio, he wrote that LeBron piece, and that will be what we always will remember.
You know what else he did in the state of Ohio? I know you might not appreciate this as much as some people would, Nick. He broke the Anthony Precourt wants to go to Austin story. He broke that story. He started Save the Crew essentially by putting that public and rallying fans. And even if you're a NFC Cincinnati fan and you hate the Columbus Crew, you can appreciate how important that was for that team.
Absolutely.
I was thinking back at we were talking about Morgan being like that new generation versus where we came from. Is that looking at Grant's career, how he went from big journalist institutions like Sports Illustrated to Substack and financing his own content. Like he's in Qatar on his own dime. Like that is a very new generational way of doing this business. And like he has moved from that to publishing books to literally running a Substack.
I think what Grant
from...
came to, I think this is very Grant, right? That he worked for Sports Illustrated for a long time. Obviously, Sports Illustrated got purchased by venture capitalists, and the whole outlook of SI changed. And everything. By the way, worst website on the internet, sportsillustrated.com. Just going to put that out there. Please go fix that. I would like to read.
Well, it's supposed to be illustrated. It's supposed to be like out there on paper somewhere.
Yeah. What I was going to say is that I think Grant appreciated that working for a big company. He had worked for Fox. He was writing some stuff for CBS, freelance, I think, as part of this World Cup. I don't think he was part of, he wasn't contracted to them directly. He was doing some freelance stuff, but he was on his own, right? He was doing the Substack thing. He was doing football with Grant. Well, I think his idea was, I can really do whatever I want. I can cover the important the things I think I don't have to pitch to an editor. I don't have to get this through somebody. And even though he had a name, he recognized there were always barriers. There would always be somebody in corporate, somebody in legal said, no, we can't write that. We can't go after the Qataris for that. What are you talking about? He was willing to point out that Fox was taking a bunch of advertising money from Qatar to send their guys there. Grant was the guy who was on top of that story that Fox was using money that the Qataris had given them to have their people in Qatar because they originally were going to broadcast from L.A. the World Cup. Grant did that, knowing who he worked for Fox. He had been, he'd been a reporter for them. He'd been on television with them, and he was calling them out and saying, "Hey, this is nonsense."
Yeah,
and that's a bravery. I mean, it comes from his status, but that's a bravery.
I know we got Ray on the line, so he wants to talk about. But I think Grant would want us to still make sure we cover soccer tonight. So after we get done with these calls and stuff like that.
We'll get Ray on the line.
Let's
save
honest.
10 minutes.
We had no plans to do anything other than this, but the Gio Reyna stuff that's coming out right now needs to be addressed.
We'll save 10 minutes for Gio Reyna and Gregg Berhalter, whose role is very significant in this. Let's go to Ray in Milwaukee. We'll get caller on the air. What's up, Ray?
I think he was a phenomenal person. I even reached out to some of the non-people. Which is amazing. Like if you tweeted and something like that, and if he liked your tweet, he would like it. But the way I always feel is what made Grant Wahl special to me, in my opinion, is that he was bilingual and that he was able to bridge a gap within a community that is sorely missed in certain aspects. When you talk to dual nationals, whether they chose to play for the United States or whether they chose to play for a different country, particularly a Latin American country, he would not be afraid to interview these people in preferred language that they preferred to speak in. And I think that's amazing because sometimes when we talk about international sports, there's jingoism that comes with that. And to me, he was able to express these perspectives in a non-judgment way.
Yeah. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, Grant was mugged. Was it in El Salvador, Honduras?
2009. I'm going to let Ray go. Appreciate it, Ray. 2009, he was mugged. In fact, again, reading Alexander Abnos today at The Athletic, writing about how he had his own gotten mugged story in Brazil in 2014, and Grant met with him to talk it out and to let him get those feelings out about what that moment was like getting mugged in a foreign country while covering soccer. So
yet still unwavering in how he approached himself outside the country when covering the sport.
Yeah. All right, this is going to be a difficult, hard left turn, but we'll do it here because, again, today was supposed to be originally a very fun end of the year nonsense show. World Cup's over. We can all relax. Let's play a game or two. Then it became obviously this remembering of Grant Wahl and his career and his impact on soccer in this country and impact on us. We're probably not sitting here. I'm not doing a radio show every day if Grant Wahl doesn't help boost us 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was.
Huge fan of Soccer Morning, that guy.
And then the Gio Reyna thing blows up. Now, I'm trying to pull together the timeline here, Jared. And I'm just going to go to...
I believe Berhalter's story came out first.
Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give you the information that we have from Jeff Carlisle, who seems to have written this all up in a way that makes sense. The lead, of course, now that we have had some unfolding of this story, the lead is that Giovanni Reyna was almost sent home from the World Cup due to a lack of effort in training and in a pre-tournament scrimmage against Qatari side Al Gharafa SC. He did not start a single game in Qatar. He played the entire second half of the final match against the Netherlands, obviously coming on after Jesus Ferreira was ineffective. The disclosure about how all of this unfolded in the camp in Qatar came because Gregg Berhalter was speaking at the HOW or Howe Institutes for Society Summit on Moral Leadership in New York on Tuesday. This is what kind of speaking engagements you get when you're the U.S. men's national team head coach, I guess. His comments were later published in a newsletter by Charterworks in which he said that the U.S., quote, had a player that was clearly not meeting the expectations on and off the field. One of 26 players, so it stood out. As a staff, we sat together for hours deliberating what we were going to do with this player. We were ready to book a plane ticket home. That's how extreme it was. There is further reporting. I don't think it's in this piece. Jason McIntyre has it on Twitter, and I'm not quite sure of his sources, but this is what's out there. He's saying that there was a vote in the team. So 25 other players voting on Giovanni Reyna, whether he would stay or go. 13 voted stay, 12 voted go. That's how close this was, according to Jason McIntyre, Jared. And there's, look, Gregg Berhalter outing Gio in this leadership conference without saying his name, but still, everybody knew. So there's a couple things. One, he tells this story without outing Gio, but of course, people who are there who know anything about the story of this team would have recognized immediately who he was talking about based on the controversy that came out when Ronaldo said he was asked to lie about his injury status and he wasn't playing games and the whole American soccer community was up in arms about Gio Reyna's status. And then they apparently, Berhalter and U.S. Soccer are saying this whole thing was supposed to be off the record where he was speaking, not supposed to get out. But Gregg Berhalter's not a stupid person, neither is U.S. Soccer. If you go to anything where there are, I don't know, 10 people in a crowd, it's going to get out. Like, what the hell? You think this is going to be private? No. People aren't going to take this to their grave. It's going to get out. And it got published in a newsletter. I mean, Jesus Christ, what are we doing here?
Okay, so obviously we only have Berhalter's side of this story. But that being said, as someone that gets paid to be a leader every day.
Well, so one more detail real quick, because I do think it's important. Gio was called out. There are rumors of an altercation with Tyler Adams. I haven't seen that confirmed, but there's rumors of an altercation with Tyler Adams over Gio's lack of effort. Again, in this scrimmage and training. He was then asked to apologize to the team, which apparently he did, which may have saved him in staying at the World Cup. I don't know that we're going to... I mean, maybe Gio makes a statement. I don't know, but you're right. We don't exactly have clarification from Gio's side.
But I'll say this. As someone who gets paid to be a leader, and being a leader is hard.
Oh, look at you.
It is hard. Listen, it's not easy to get everyone on the same page doing something. If everything is as how Berhalter said it, and we don't know if that's the case, credit to Berhalter. I think he managed this fantastically. If it's actually the way that he's presenting it. Now, granted, there's a reason for him to want to present himself in the best light. I think it was at some kind of leadership conference or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I said, yeah.
So there's a reason why he would want to be projected correctly. But that being said, this goes back to, this is why you make a leadership council. Hopefully Tyler Adams is holding him accountable on the field. And let's be honest, too. Love Gio. You love Gio. We all love Gio. We all know what the talent is. But it's funny, my brother texted me this during one of the games, I think it was probably the last game against the Netherlands, and it's true, and I've thought it many times. No player has worse body language on the field than Gio Reyna.
Yeah, I'm going to hold my hand up and say I was wrong, because I have said many times in our bestie Slack and maybe even on Twitter and other venues, that I liked Gio's body language, because to me it indicated he wants the ball, he's a killer.
That's not what I'm talking about, though.
No, I know, but it's all part and parcel of the same mentality, right? He thinks he is the shit, right? He thinks he's the shit. And while he's an incredibly talented player, there's a question of, okay, how much demanding can he actually do? And again, the idea that he sulks that much, that he doesn't give an effort in a training session or in a pre-tournament scrimmage. I mean,
I'm interested to know, what does that look like, though? What does not giving effort look like enough in a scrimmage that's worthy of this? Like, that's weird to me. That doesn't make sense still to me.
Apparently
right there.
doing nothing. Yeah.
I like this. Maybe he's trying to make the point that this whole scrimmage is not worth our time when we're like a couple of days away from the World Cup. Why are we playing this level of opponent? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that is. That's odd to me. Like, I'm wondering if the altercation with him and Tyler Adams was during the scrimmage. That's what I'm wondering. Like, I don't know. But I like that Tyler Adams is holding a player accountable.
I'm seeing a lot of. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of. Well, certainly Gio's attitude is something, right? Gio's attitude has to improve. If this is something that's going to dog him, and just to say that this isn't only a U.S. men's national team thing, Stefan Bushko, who covers German football, covers Dortmund, has said that there are stories within Dortmund about Gio's attitude occasionally being an issue, right? So this is not something that Gio's guilty of only when he's with the national team. Apparently it's also, now that doesn't mean he's a bad kid. It doesn't mean you toss him aside, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't mean you give up on Gio Reyna. There is obviously some maturation that has to go on here. Now it can be Gio Reyna effed up, right? Bad, right? He ruined his chances to play significant minutes in a World Cup by being an attitude problem from the very beginning. I don't know, because he was mad he wasn't starting against Wales. Okay, whatever. That you can say that. We can also say that Berhalter mishandled this situation on some level. Okay, well, I'm not talking about internally with the team, although there is the Wijnaldum factor about the story about asking Gio to lie. Gio saying, no, I was fit. Berhalter doesn't have to tell me why he didn't play me, but I was fit, right? I don't know. Berhalter does occasionally go a little far with trying to protect his players.
So he should be on the press conference after the Wales game should be, Gio was a dick at practice, so he's not getting playing time?
Yeah, look, I understand that it's difficult to kind of talk out what the alternative approach might be. Like, what do you do when this happens? You don't throw your player under the bus. They certainly won't play for you anymore. Now, the thing is that he's doing this after the tournament, and there may be some indication about whether or not Berhalter's coming back in this too, Jared. If he was willing to talk about it publicly at all, does that mean that he's basically done with the national team and he's moving on and, hey, this isn't going to be a factor for me? Hold on, because a lot of people are out here right now ripping Gregg Berhalter apart, saying, why would anybody want to play for him now because he went and tossed a player under the bus? Everybody knew it was Gio that he was talking about.
That's a little bit fair.
There are also a lot of sycophants who are saying Gio Reyna should get to do whatever the hell he wants to do. He's Gio Reyna, right? This is a
Gio
legitimate
Reyna hasn't done
comment.
Shit yet. Sorry, guys.
Legitimate comment I saw on the, and I know that's not everybody, okay? But I saw a comment that said, I would be pissed if I was Gio too, that I had to be in a team with Christian Roldan and Aaron Long.
Whatever. That's just the Euro snob.
If that's your attitude as a player, don't play a team sport. Just go away. If you can't handle being in a team, don't be in a team. Right? Don't do something else with your life, right? Giovanni Reyna is an incredibly talented player, but if he can't figure out how to work within this at the age of 20, dude is 20.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so but listen, that's just the nature of the world. Get used to it. There's always going to be a boss. You're always going to work for someone, and that person is going to have a say-so in what you do in life. Grow the F up. You can not be happy with the coach. That's fine, but how you carry yourself as a young man matters. Nick, did you have something?
Well, I was going to add, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Claudio captain?
Yes.
How would he have put up with this situation?
That's a good question.
Claudio,
it's a good question.
Look,
and apparently so what do you want? The captain of this team was Tyler Adams. He was given the armband before the tournament started. We had this whole who's the captain? Tyler Adams is the captain. Again, this is not 100% confirmed, but the stories are that Tyler confronted Gio. There may have even been some sort of altercation there. Is that what we want our captain to do? Right? We want our captain to do that, right? We want our captain to call out his teammates.
You're talking to me and Nick, you guys who grew up watching Roy Keane and idolizing Roy Keane. Get your damn right. I want someone to get in his face. He's not getting his all.
All right. I mean, so I'm seeing like, oh, the culture of this wasn't good. I mean, obviously this shows that the culture of the team wasn't as good as we thought it was. One bad apple, right? I mean, that's
Well, I'll say this too.
for a
Gio
reason.
wasn't with the team when Weston McKennie went through his issues. So Weston
No.
McKennie wasn't there for that behind the scenes. For everyone else, I think they know that Berhalter doesn't suffer fools. You know, like this is not out of. Let's be honest. This is not out of character for Gregg Berhalter how this was handled. And when you look at John Brooks, you look at Weston McKennie. You know, you look at how he called out Haji Wright. You know, and so at one point, like Gregg Berhalter doesn't seem to mind holding people to the fire. Now, Gio wasn't around for that. Maybe he doesn't have the background on that. But this is another example. At least I'll say this: whether Berhalter's right or wrong, everyone else out there can decide. But at least he
Right.
was true to character and what he's done consistently and how he handled this.
Yeah, this is an interesting point. I put it up on the screen. Let me do it again. This is from KY718. Don't Claudio and Greg have a good relationship? I think Berhalter's son grew up with Gio. So, look, obviously, Gregg Berhalter and Claudio Reyna played together. Okay? They played together for the national team. They're part of that fraternity of the U.S. men's national team. I have no doubt that there was a lot of interaction between Greg's family, Claudio's family, Gio. Gio may even have an almost like nephew-uncle type of relationship with Gregg Berhalter. I wonder, and this is speculation on my part, but this is part of the culture of the team. I wonder if that familiarity was actually a bad thing for Gio Reyna at this World Cup. Because what do you do with family you might not do with a stranger? You might sass back. You might push them. You might give them attitude because they're going to love me in the end anyway, right? Right?
Yeah. So I'm asking you a question before we get out on this. Like, I think this is an interesting thing to talk about, and I know you're gonna be like, whatever, but I think it's an honest question. Does this hurt or help Berhalter's role on maybe getting the gig again?
No, I think that this is a big enough deal. Look, I don't think you defer to Gio Reyna.
Or does this
if
mean
you're
it's
US
already
soccer.
done deal and Berhalter's burning bridges? He's done.
Well, so that was obviously some of the suggestion here that Berhalter is basically saying, whatever, I'll light the whole thing on fire. I don't think Berhalter thinks like that. I really don't hope he was. I really hope he wasn't naive enough to believe that what he said at this conference wouldn't get out. I really hope that's not the case. Okay, if that is, that's a big miscalculation on his part.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing about whether this hurts or helps him, I think this is big enough that even U.S. soccer would have to go, okay, yeah, there's some mending, there's some stuff. It's not like you can't defer to Gio and say, well, we don't renew Gregg Berhalter because of Gio Reyna, but you say, look, Gio Reyna is going to be part of this team for the next 10 years if he reaches his potential and matures as a player, right? So you have something to point to and say, probably not a good idea if Gregg comes back. Probably better to just, even if you don't really blame Gregg, he handled it okay.
Listen, if all things
he
are
massaged
equal,
everything.
all things are equal, like whoever the candidates out there, this could be the tiebreaker. This could be the tiebreaker. This could be the thing that puts someone else over the edge and why you don't go forward with Gregg Berhalter. Or it could mean that, hey, maybe even as Ernie Stewart and Brian McBride, with a team that's average age is 23 years old, they want a guy that's going to hold people and make them into young men and hold them to young men's standards, and not let them get away with this kind of bullshit. I don't know how they're going to feel about it.
Man, I don't. First of all, I don't know that I like Eric Ronaldo. Okay, I might even try to text the dude and see where he's at right now. But I don't think this vindicates Eric Ronaldo. Let's not do that. Let's not pretend like what Eric did was a good idea. He may have had some of the vibes of the situation right, but I think at the time everybody took this to be Gregg Berhalter did something wrong by asking Gio to lie because there was something going on. But it wasn't as though we knew what the extent of Gio's transgression was, or that it got to the point of the team voting whether or not to send him home. Again, I don't have verification on that story, but that's what's out there.
Okay. I mean, here's the thing. I think Gio went back to the club team with some fire in his belly. You already saw the goal he scored against, was it Rapid Vienna, I think, was during midweek.
Yeah, great goal.
Beautiful. Hopefully he has goes
goal.
back to club team focused. Hopefully he goes back to his club team thinking that, hey, there's more to the game than just what I do on the field. It's how I carry myself. And I hope that he takes this and it makes him even better professional, and that come 2026, we have not just a young, good talent, but a young, good talent with a good head on his shoulders.
Somebody said that Gio's probably not going to say anything. I think it actually behooves Gio to put a statement out. I think it does. And here's Sean saying that, You don't want to put out you don't want to make it look like Gio could be a coach killer, meaning you don't bring Berhalter back. Everybody looks at Gio and say, oh, that's why they didn't bring him back, because Gio, this whole thing happened with Gio, and that's why Berhalter didn't have a job anymore. Giovanni Reyna, even if he doesn't feel like he did something wrong, which I hope that he did based on what we know, he kind of needs to say, look,
who I feel bad for? You know who I feel bad for? Joe Scally. I feel like my man caught side shade in all this. Best friends with Gio, never saw a minute at the World Cup. Gio owes an apology to Joe Scally.
Where is the? Let me say that real quick. With the context of the other story that came out, he's losing some of the players you can't bring back. Who's he lost? I'm not saying he hasn't. I'm just curious what I'm missing. Or
I think you could say
brain not
Stefan.
working?
I think Stefan's out there kind of like talking some stuff right now as well. I mean,
Did Stefan deserve a spot on this team? 100% clear, no questions
on the team?
asked?
Yeah, I think he deserves a spot on the team.
Okay,
Starting spot?
never
No. But
Okay.
Berhalter's choice to not have a keeper controversy is understandable.
Okay.
But are you going to say that
but-
Sean Johnson and Eden Horvath are easily better keepers than Zach
But they weren't
Steffen?
going to step on the barring injury, they weren't going to step on the field.
That's what your point was. Was he been good enough to
I
make
know.
the team?
Okay. All right. This is what is this? What is this? It's interesting that you believe the known liar Berhalter, but don't believe Gio's side.
Why do you do this? Why do you do this?
'Cause I wanna
There's
hear-
a
I wanna
random
see- I wanna
comment
see what
in
they're
there.
actually-
You take it personal. You feel like you got
No,
to.
I'm not taking it personally. I want to know what that is. The known.
I don't know. He's not on the air. We can't ask him.
Okay. All right.
This is why it's
I don't
good you
know.
deleted Twitter. This right here, that exact thing.
I
That's
haven't-
why you
I-
have to be on Twitter.
I'm looking at it. I got to delete it today. I got to delete it today. All right.
I
all
love
right.
having you back on for a little bit, buddy.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it'll stay. Who knows? I was getting past the Grant Wall morning period. I'm actually not there yet. We'll see how that goes. All right. Any other business here before we get
I don't
out
think
of
so.
here?
And listen, guys, we had every intention of having a fun game show. Like we were just gonna mess around for a bit. Last one before we take a break for the holidays. Jason's about to go to Puerto Rico. I think is it Puerto Rico you're going to or Denver? Puerto Rico?
No, I'm going Denver. What
I don't know.
I'm going to Puerto Rico for 3 weeks.
Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So he's going away for a while, and we got some other stuff. I've got stuff going on every weekend for a while right now as well. So this is probably going to be our last show. We'll talk about seeing if there's some kind of bonus thing or something like that on the Patreon, but I don't think we have the time to do it. You're gone next weekend. But at the end of the day, the show wasn't what we were expecting, but also this wasn't the weekend that we were expecting. This thing happened, and I think Jason and I wanted to have a platform for everyone to come together and just a little bit, everyone say something or hear something or you just feel like you're part of a community that's also hurting this weekend. And thanks to JTT for coming on. I mean, if there's someone out there that's operating and close with Grant Wahl and kind of looks up to Grant, it was really good to hear his theory on his feelings on this. And I really appreciate John taking the time to come on the show and bear witness a little bit.
Yeah, I have to do a radio show tomorrow, and not sure exactly how I'm going to do that. But I think this is going to help me. This is going to help me. I know Chris Whittingham put out a podcast. Chris Whittingham was working with Grant on the Football with Grant Wall podcast. I have to go listen to it. I'm probably going to cry over that, but that's out there. It sucks. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It sucks that Grant Wall's not with us anymore. I saw a couple of tweets. I mean, there were so many, rightfully so. But I saw a couple that stuck with me. Katie Nolan said something about Grant, and she said, the world sucks more. That's it. The world sucks more than Grant Wall's not in it, and that's hard to deal with.
My thoughts go out to Celine, his wife, Eric, his brother, he and I have been following each other on Twitter.
And my heart wants to go out to Eric. I'm worried a little bit, but my heart goes out to Eric and the family.
Eric and I have been following each other on Twitter for a number of years. He's a good guy, and my thoughts are with him. Little dog Zizou, that Grant was always never shy about sharing on his social media and stuff like that. There's a lot of people who are going to go through a hard time right now, and just know that we're thinking of you guys, and I hope they get through this as well as they possibly can.
I'm going to speak for myself here. I mean, this is something that, again, I mentioned earlier in the show when we were talking to John, that it's a weird feeling, right? I don't know how Grant Wall processed it, right? He wrote for Sports Illustrated. He wrote a best-selling book about David Beckham. He wrote another book about great soccer players. He had access to all these things. He knew all these people. He boarded with Guillaume Balag and Henry Winter and all these guys. I mean, that's a level that I can't reach. I can't fathom. So maybe he knew what his status was and understood the power that he had. I don't think of myself as like some sort of kingmaker. It's not that. It's this weird balance of like, okay, well, I've got a little bit of a profile. I can probably help some people, and I can probably do more than what I've done. And part of my journey, this is sound really weird, but part of my journey, I've had a rough 2022, has been to recognize the things that I'm not good at and try to get better at them. And one of them is being more connected to people. I mean, one of my best friends in the world is a guy I've seen in person twice. Jared, right? We've hung out twice in person.
And you
is that
still
right?
won't play disc golf.
3 times.
Despite
Three
the fact
times.
how much he asked you to.
I shorted you
Sent you
one.
discs.
Yeah. But this is a problem for me. And I want to be better at connections. I want to be better at helping people. I want to be better about lifting people up in the soccer community. And I'm here. You can find me. You know, I'm on the internet. It's not that tough. Use some mechanism. Maybe I'll leave Twitter open just for DMs.
You're on the internet and you're in our hearts.
No. Grant Wall's in our hearts today. That's it. Anything else, Mr.
That's
DuBois?
it, buddy. Like I said, we lost a big one, and it
We're
hurts,
not
and
going
it's
out
okay
with
that it
music
hurts.
tonight. So we will talk to you. We'll probably talk to you in 2023, I guess.